Shalom, this is Yair, Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel, from Brit-Am, which is close to the location of Bethlehem, or where Bethlehem was in biblical times. And this is in liberated territory, the so-called West Bank. And this is the area we are speaking to you from, that portion of Yehuda which has been liberated recently on behalf of all of Israel. And the subject of the present talk concerns Joseph, the identity of Joseph. We identify Joseph with the English-speaking peoples. In other words, they are part of the lost 10 tribes. We identify Joseph with the English-speaking peoples. That is part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. There were 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes divided into two different sections. The northern section, comprising 10 tribes, was taken away by the Assyrians, taken to different portions of the Assyrian Empire, lost consciousness of its identity, of its ancestry, forgot who they were, and nevertheless stayed together to a reasonable degree. As they moved to the west, and they settled in western areas in different waves of migration, different movements, in some cases different groups of them, split apart from the others and recoalesced. We trace these movements historically through the use of history, through the use of archaeology, linguistics, mythology, local legends and records, and whatever source is pertinent to us. This is what we do, what our organisation stands for. Finding or proving where the lost 10 tribes are and spreading knowledge of this research, and also working towards the reconciliation between Judah and the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So as we said, the lost 10 tribes on the whole were to be found amongst Western peoples. Within those Western peoples, we find a preponderance of groups that we may identify as descendant from Joseph, either Ephraim or Manasseh. Remember that Joseph was divided into two different tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So both from Ephraim and from Manasseh, we find a preponderance of the groups identifiable as descendant from Joseph in the British Isles, including Ireland, including Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England. That is where we find them. That is where they gave expression to their tribal ancestry, and from these regions they founded Canada and they founded the USA, and they also contributed to a significant degree to the foundational stock, demographic stock of the USA. And also, we find the descendants of Joseph to amongst the offshoots of Britain in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, and so too even amongst those groups from Germany, from France, amongst the Alsatians and others, and the Swiss who moved to the USA, and from Europe in general. We also find elements from Joseph, as we have shown elsewhere, elements from tribes that moved to those regions, and they too were descended from Joseph. At all events, however you want to explain the phenomenon exists. That is where descendants of people who may be identified as belonging to Joseph settled, and that is where they gave expression to themselves. Now we are concerned with biblical proofs of this, biblical proofs of the conclusions, and there are numerous proofs. We're just going to list some of them very briefly in this present talk. Deuteronomy 33 verses 15 to 17, it tells us that Moses, Deuteronomy is the blessing of Moses to Joseph. And he says that Joseph will be promised with agricultural plenty, with mineral resources, find favour in the eyes of God, and that his majesty is likened unto a bull, his horns are the hooves of a unicorn, he will reach unto the ends of the earth, he will push people together to the ends of the earth. And this blessing applies to both Ephraim and Manasseh. And as we said, we find descendants of Joseph in the USA, in the British Isles, in Australia, New Zealand, and related nations. And we should remember that the British Empire once encompassed 25% of the area of the world and ruled over 20% of the population of the earth. So too, this was followed by the USA, that determined much of world policy, was very influential throughout all of the world, and it still is, and it was extremely wealthy, and it built upon the foundations laid by the British Empire. In some ways it copied the British Empire, in other ways it was different from it, but it was a continuation of it from a geopolitical consideration. And this was the USA, and the USA controlled or possessed between 50 to 70% of the world's mineral resources and wealth. When you take wealth to be the surplus, the tradable, the expendable surplus of production. We should note that Britain was nicknamed John Bull. John Bull refers us to the blessing of Moses to Joseph, that he have the majesty of his bull, and that also there's horns of the horns of the unicorn, and the unicorn is also found in this coat of arms of Britain, but it also connects us to the USA, since the unicorn in the coat of arms of Britain was derived from Scotland, where they had 2 unicorns in their coat of arms, and a good portion of the early settlers and the very important people in USA history came from Scotland, or they came from Northern Ireland, which to a good degree is in its turn derived from Scottish ancestry. And the irons and unicorns are linked together, connection with Israel in later times in Numbers 23, 22 to 24. And Jacob blessed Joseph and said that his name and the names of his fathers Abraham and Isaac would be applied to Joseph in Genesis 48:16, and that they should be a major influential party within the world. He translated as majority, translated as multitude, but actually meaning majority or determinating element. See Genesis 48:16, as it says in Genesis 48, he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, to the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day. The angel has redeemed me from all evil. Bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." In other words, the sons of Joseph were blessed, that the names of the fathers Abraham and Isaac, and also the name of Jacob, should be called upon them. And now this may be, as we have explained it, taken symbolically, that the essence of the forefathers should become revealed through them, but you can also take it literally as both, not necessarily in a contradictory sense, but using both the symbolic and actual sense of this blessing to be applicable. So Abraham was known as Abraham the Hebrew, and Hebrew or Iberi, which also means Hebrew, was a name given to the Celtic peoples. It was the name by which they called themselves in ancient times. They did not call themselves Celts, they called themselves Iberi or Iberi, and this name in Hebrew means Hebrew. So, and this is the name that they did actually call themselves. And also we have the name Isaac or Yitzchak in Hebrew. Yitzchak gave rise to different permutations, which the Scythian, who amongst them were Israelites, applied to themselves, such as Isaac Guli, Zohak, and so on. And these names permutated into Saxon, such as with Anglo-Saxons, and the Anglo-Saxons conquered England, and they are associated with it. Anglo-Saxon peoples is a generic name now applied to the English-speaking nations. We also have Yaakov, the name Jacob, also also pronounceable as Yankov. We have in short Jake or Yankee in Yiddish and Hebrew. Yankee is another nickname for an American, Yankee. And this is how it sounds, and this is what it is, no matter what its origin. And Isaiah also reflects this. He says in Isaiah 49 verse 6, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also make you a light of the nations, so that my salvation shall reach to the end of the earth. Once again, we have the end of the earth. Should also note that Jacob was another name for Israel. See Genesis 32:28 and 35:10. Should note that from this blessing in Genesis 49:22 to 26, we understand that Joseph was to receive all of the blessings promised to the forefathers and to Jacob, and also the name of Jacob, which is also mentioned in Genesis 48:16, and also in Numbers 23:22 to 24. And in an additional intensity, in a manifold manner. In other words, the other tribes also to receive blessings, and they were blessed both by Moses and by Jacob in the blessings. Each one was to receive its own individual blessing, as we see. But Joseph was to receive a blessing that encompassed all of them together in a very much greater manner, in a multifold manner. And this was a blessing given to Joseph, and therefore we find all of the blessings that were promised to the tribes in general to be fulfilled in Joseph more than in the other tribes. As it says in Genesis 49:26, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the crown on the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. The descendants of Joseph were destined to rule the waves and dominate the nations of the world. See Numbers 24:7. Joseph was promised agricultural bounty, mineral resources, favourable climate. It was associated with the people being pushed together unto the ends of the earth. Deuteronomy 33, verses 13 to 17. The tribes of Jacob in general are linked to the ends of the earth. Isaiah 49:6, also Genesis 33:13, Isaiah 41:8, 9 and 13, and so on. They would be a mighty seafaring nation in many waters, Numbers 24:7. To the north and west of the land of Israel, moving off to the land of Sinim, Isaiah 49:12, land of Sinim meaning Australia and New Zealand. They would also be in Salafat, meaning France, as we were explained according to tradition. They would have agricultural bounty, Genesis 27:28, 49:25, Deuteronomy 33:13, 14. Hosea 2:8, very large populations, Genesis 15:5, 22:17, 24:60, 32:10, Numbers 23:10, and so on. The numerous other points of identification, also Numbers 24:9 and Micah 5:7-9, describes the military preeminence that these nations will have. They will be the most powerful nations on earth. They were also to prove themselves capable of defeating Edom, the Edomite powers of Europe and the world. See Ezekiel 25:14, Abijah 1:18. India, Egypt and the Suez Canal were to be controlled by them, and Africans were to be transported overseas in chains to serve them, as happened in the times when the slaves were brought over to North America. See Isaiah 43:3 and 45:14, and the articles and YouTube clip that we have on this subject. In addition, we have an analysis of biblical Hebrew of the names applied to Ephraim and Manasseh. Of the names applied to Ephraim and Manasseh. The name Ephraim pertains or describes someone who is of aristocratic character, when the British still have a aristocratic attitude, hierarchic attitude, one could say. Also, they also have the institution of aristocracy. And whereas the Americans are more egalitarian, believe in a representation, responsible representation, and also in the principles of capitalism. And this too is reflected in names, biblical names applied to Manasseh and to Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh. So taking all of these proofs together, we have a definite proof that the descendants of Joseph are to be found amongst English-speaking peoples. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.